In the previous video, I've introduced what the concept book is, what it's for, and how we'll be using it throughout this series. I've also gone over the basic premise of the game we'll be making throughout this series. I've also gone over creating a basic information page. We've reserved a couple pages for contents, and I've gone through setting up and actually filling out a features page. So in this video, we'll be going over this game here we'll be making more elaborately. So let's just start. Portalus is going to be an open-world survival game that takes place out in space. Now, the premise behind that is, or at least the way I've thought of it, will be to have a situation to where a series of events which leaves the ship both lost and damaged out in the middle of who knows where space, with no hope of ever returning. Also, the ship and its facilities have to be damaged in such a way to where colonization of a planet or a small enough planet cannot be possible. So basically, everyone within Portalus is basically limited to either setting up a orbital colony around a planet or finding a small enough body that they can pull resources off of. This is assuming that any of the other situations that can happen in the game are actually going to have room to allow that. Unless there's no bodies that the ship can actually pull resources from and they're just stuck out there in space. That is also the majority of these situations I actually want to apply here. So basically, you're just going to have a ship full of people where they all have, well, the only thing that they have access to is basically the resources that they got in there with. So they're going to have to figure out some way to actually survive there, or at least the player is. Now, the reason the humans, in this case, everyone aboard the Portalus, or the SS Portalus, as they would call it within game, is fleeing Earth is because basically the entire solar system is now coming over. I don't want to say alien invasion because they're not really invading, but I will say alien occupation that ultimately will result into the destruction of pretty much most of the solar system, if not all of it. And while the human race itself has had contact with these aliens, it has been determined that the solar system is basically going to be doomed and everybody needs to just flee and go to another system and hope to rebuild. That's basically the only option here in this case. Now, this is because the Lumerians, or at least that's the name I've given this alien race. I probably should have come up with a better one, but that's all I have at the moment. These aliens have come to eat our star, and humans, despite all of its technical advances, do not have the resources or the ability to actually remain self-sustaining within a system that has no star and no place of solar heat. So everyone has to flee. That's not an option. Humans have tried fighting these Lemurians, but basically at this point in time, at least lore-wise, there was no real way to defeat them given that these creatures are just different. You see, these Lemurian creatures, or these Lemurian aliens, are kind of made from like this plasmid slash biological sort of plasmid creature life form type that the human race has never really encountered before. Their bodies are comprised in such a way to where it fundamentally breaks human perception of what life is and how life should work, how life should exist. And because of this, the human race has no way to properly combat these creatures. This is why fleeing is pretty much Earth's only option, well, humanity's only option. So the reason these creatures are actually eating our sun is because, well, they're made of plasmid, the sun is made out of plasma, and these creatures technically feed off plasma or the residuals of plasma in order to survive. And they do that by basically extracting as much heat and energy from the star as possible using these special ring-shaped devices that they have to basically cover all around the proximity of the sun. Not too close to where they themselves will actually fry up or anything like that, but just close enough to where they can safely extract heat without any of their devices or bodies actually being incinerated. So when the sun is actually cool enough, these creatures will be able to actually start extracting some of the material that makes up that star and would actually be able to feed on that. A plus for them would actually to have the sun collapse into a white or brown dwarf, whichever it is that a sun or small star would normally collapse into, assuming that it's not a black hole, because that's definitely not something they want to happen. But yes, they ultimately do want the star to collapse into becoming a white dwarf. This way they get plenty of the material that has been basically exploded all over the system. They can easily pick that up And since the white dwarf would technically be cool enough for them to get close to actively collect the materials that they will feed from there, that is a complete win for them. The problem with that is, at that point, assuming that none of the planets get incinerated through the supernova, which was most likely is what will happen, even if humanity survived, they'd still have to deal with, their only light source or their only solar heat source being a white dwarf, which probably isn't going to put out enough heat or energy to help sustain life anywhere else within the solar system. So it should be obvious by now that the Lumerians really don't have that sort of limitation with their lifespan or with their survival conditions, I guess you want to call it, since they're made of plasmids or plasma or some sort of plasmid biological material. They are a spacefaring race. Their bodies are very resistant to heat, their bodies are very resistant to cold, but they do have some sort of physical form. It's not like they're just creatures of, light and they just exist in that manner. No, they do have some sort of biological material that they can actually have physical touch, physical form. As far as they look, I don't know why, but I'm getting sort of like a jellyfish sort of aesthetic with these creatures. I don't know why. That's just what I'm seeing right now. That may change. I kind of really don't want it to, because I was thinking, okay, these creatures technically grow and exist within each other. So let's say if you have Portalisk being a Titan or a capital class ship, they too would have something that is like a ship, but it's not really a ship. It's more like a larger version of one of their specimens, one of their species, that they can grow and go in and out of safely and can allow for deep space travel without anyone becoming, I guess, I don't know, injured. Might be a bad way to put it, sort of going off the top of my head here right now. That is the purpose of this here video. Regardless, these Lemurians basically go from star to star, consume it, drain it, causing it to collapse into a white dwarf or brown dwarf, whichever it is that an exploding star will collapse into. Again, ideally not a black hole. They have no better chance of surviving that than any human vessel or any human body would either. And from there, they'll move on to the next star. But they'll only consume small enough stars. And our star, as scientists claim, is pretty small, so ours is like a perfect candidate. But larger stars, like supergiants, they don't want those. They're too big, they're too massive, they will take too long to drain, and will ultimately be a waste of resources and time, and the resulting supernova from a collapsing star of that size will end up killing them as well. These Lumerians, these aliens, these creatures, they're not stupid. They're not like basic primal animals. They are very intelligent, pretty much just as intelligent as humans. But the way they're portrayed or going to be portrayed within the lore, within our aesthetics, is going to be in such a way to where it's not going to seem like they have a type of society, or at least one that's based off of any form of intelligence. But the player will eventually notice this over time that, hey, they really are. They have ships, they have machines, they have tools, they have all those such things that any normal human would have, or at least the human race, humanity would have. And basically how these two races are going to regard each other is basically going to be the same reflectively. The humans are going to view these creatures as, whoa, this thing cannot possibly exist because its biological life form is in this such way. That's impossible. And these Lemurians are going to have pretty much the exact same assumption about humans. Wow, these things are weird. They're made of dirt and metal, just like everything else we try to avoid. That's basically what I want to have here. However, I am thinking that Lemurians can't technically speak, at least not in the normal way. Actually, this is really a good segue here. The Lemurians are going to actually communicate with each other in terms of, how do you put it, strobing? Wow, that's probably a weird way to put it, maybe. But basically, I want them to be able to flash lights at each other or just glow in such a frequency that would actually translate to words, phrases, and sentences in the same way that a human would speak to another human. When I say strobe, I mean kind of like the way your fiber optics work, where basically you're going to have a beam of light at a certain frequency that will flash a certain number of times, and that number of times will equate to a bit. And you get a couple billion of those, you're going to have basically a program or lines of code, whatever it is you want to, however it is you want to put it. But yeah, that's basically going to be the way they'll communicate with each other. It's not going to be so fast that it doesn't that to a player or to any other human being looking at them that they're just a solid state of light. No, you're going to actually be able to see them visibly flash. And for the Lumerians, that will actually translate to language, words, etc. I've also mentioned before that these creatures do have a physical form, so they can't exactly, phase through walls or ignite themselves into like some sort of fiery blaze or, basically illuminate an entire area with their bodies, even though they can technically glow. But for balancing reasons, we do actually want them to have some sort of strengths and weaknesses, just like the humans will have. And those we will be going over in a later video, especially for humans. But let's say for these creatures, since they have a physical form, there's going to be kind of fleshy to feel. They're not exactly going to be wet or anything like that. I don't even think that's going to be a necessary detail, but whatever, it's out there now. But since human weaponry consists of both ballistic and basically laser weapons, I don't know about plasma weapons just yet. That might be a research that can be developed later throughout the gameplay. I would say these creatures are going to be weak to ballistic type weapons. So basically, any sort of gun or weapon that uses bullets, blades, such things as that, since their bodies will be technically soft enough to allow that to be, something damaging to them. Whereas laser weapons will damage them, but it's going to be such a small degree that we want to encourage the player not to use laser-based weapons as a means to combat these creatures. Now, also already said that these creatures are a spacefaring race, so they can't actually survive without air. They have no need for it. They can't survive out in the vacuum of space. They are heat resistant and they are technically cold resistant, and they can survive quite well in arid biomes. However, when it comes to such things as liquids or waters, they're not too. Well, let's say it's kind of like humans and radiations. For them, it's just a no. It's something they are going to be highly damaged by. It's something that they want to stay away from. So that might be something that the player could actually use to their advantage in certain situations down the line. It's not to say that they're susceptible to all liquids, just some liquids, like water or anything else we decide to come up with later down the line when we properly do a data sheet for these guys. But that's going to be something that we're going to note. Also, I'm not really sure as to how many different types of these Lemurians there are going to be. I do want there to be a wide variety, but not so wide that it's like, Pokemon or anything like that. No, 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 no. I mean, I want there to be at least 9 to 10 different variations or different types of Lumerians that the player will most likely encounter throughout their game. And other than the default one that I can think of right now as to why I created this race in the first place, I'm not sure what those others will be. I don't know what they'll be called. I don't actually have an idea of what abilities they'll all have. And I do want their abilities to vary. I do want these creatures to have a certain shared ability, and then I want specialized units or specialized types to have their own specific type things that they can actually do. So that's something that we're most likely going to go over later down the line. If anything, I'll probably end up asking you guys for your input or for your suggestions, either through some sort of contest or just a suggestion video, I guess. And of course, should your suggestion be used, you will be fully credited for that, within the credits, of course. But anyway, that's not what this video is about. Since I don't know what else to actually say about the Lumerians right now, since we'll be later detailing them anyway, I want to talk about the other alien race that's going to be featured in this game. And they are basically the adversary to the Lumerians. I have no real name for them. I do want them to be like this sort of arid type race, like something that's like based on exoskeletal, like almost bug-like, but not really. I mean, if anything, they're closer to what humans would actually suggest is, proper for life to exist, but would still be so much different than humans that their technology and how they implement it are different. Their culture, their lifestyle is all going to be technically similar, but very much different from the way we humans exist. For example, these exo aliens or exo creatures or insect-like creatures, or however you wish to put them, exist in pretty much the same light that humans do. So basically, everything about the human life, human experience can actually be reflected onto them. Only their bodies are comprised in such a way to where they can actually survive much harsher conditions than we can. But unlike the Lemurians, they're not a spacefaring race outright. They're similar to humans in that they have to develop ships and other technologies to make space travel possible. But they will exist in a certain way to where they are fundamentally different from humans. That might also be a bad way to put that, but I'm kind of short for words at the moment, so excuse me on that part. Anyway, these exo aliens are at war with the Lumerians. Since these exos have a much faster population growth rate than humans would, they kind of need more planets to colonize and very quickly. And because of their biological makeup, they can actually exist within harsher conditions than humans or any earthling life can. So these exos basically have a much wider range of planets they can actually inhabit. The problem is that these planets end up becoming inhabitable once the Lumerians actually devour the star or collapse the star that's within the system that they have their eyes on. So this is quite literally why these two races are at war. Now, where do the humans come in? Well, they really don't. And that's what kind of makes these Exos not really the bad guys here, even though they're going to be actively against the humans in this case, or at least when they come across the SS Portalists. And that's mainly because, well, humans are kind of in the way. Now, what I mean by that is, even though that these two alien races are attacking each other, the Lumerians are basically, they're kind of like the Quarians from Mass Effect. Well, at least in concept anyway. Their entire civilization exists within space. Like, they're not, confined to a planet like humans are. But the Exos, like I said, are much like humans, that they are basically confined to planets, but they are actively fighting what they would call the Lumerian threat. So pretty much 100% of what any player or any of the human within the lore will see of the Exo alien race is basically going to be only their military divisions, and that's pretty much it. Because their military is actively trying to destroy the Lumerians entirely. Like, none of them can exist. It's basically they're performing a genocide for the betterment of the galaxy because they're going around eating all the small stars. Stars that may most likely have planets that orbit them, that may be full of life as well. So the Exos here aren't really bad. They're not really evil, but humans in this case, at least in this division, in this little patch of the battlefield that is in within the Milky Way, they are in the way and they need us out of the way. They don't go actively, hunting down and destroying all the humans that have escaped Earth. No, it's just that at one particular battlefield where the humans happen to have crashed their ship or at least became adrift in space, that's where the Lumerians are, or at least some of them are, and the Exos have come to basically extinguish that division. But since this is humans, how humans are, hey, look, aliens, kill it. So in this instance, the Exos will have no real problems or qualms with actually destroying everyone aboard the SS Portalists, assuming they don't destroy the ship outright, which is not necessarily what we want to happen. I do want the Exos to at least have invested interest in learning about humans just as much as they would about the Lumerians. So, at least within gameplay, anyway, at least this is a plan of mechanics or set of mechanics I have in mind. I do want all three of these races to be actively trying to get intel on one another, constantly abducting bodies or fallen enemies of one another, and trying to learn as much as possible. This would eventually, of course, lead to the developments of different research, improved weapons, armors, and such things as that. All of which we will be going over later in the series. Anyway, Lumerians want everybody dead. They don't care for actual biological life, or at least any that's different from their own, or basically not a part of their, I guess, their species, pretty much. So, yeah, if it's there, it's alive, they want it dead. Kill it, set it on fire, whatever it is that they're going to do, they want it to die. So, of course, this does include humanity. So, why go after one lone colonial ship now that they know it's a colonial ship? Well, it's kind of like the way you would, let's say, fight off a weed problem in your garden. If there are weeds, you don't want them to grow back after you pull them or you uproot them or whether you kill them at the root. That way, you stop them from ever trying to regrow back. Man, I probably butchered that explanation, but I hope you guys understand what I mean. So, Here we have a small little speck of a bastion of little humans left, and they're fleeing, and the Lemurians are going after them because basically humans have already shown a capacity and a willingness to fight. They've already shown that they have the technology to do so, and the last thing the Lemurians would want is another spacefaring or at least space capable race of going after them to retaliate in some way. So yeah, so a division of Lumerians are being sent off to basically follow this ship through the a destroyed hypergate, which I forgot to mention earlier, but I guess I'll detail that later here. And you have a division, a military division of the Exos that are actively chasing the Lumerians that are going after the SS Portulus. So that's why you have three different races here clashing all at once. You have a destroyed SS ship, or a destroyed colonial ship, and you have the Lumerians trying to get into it to kill everybody, and then you have the Exos, who's just like, if it glows, it dies. If it shoots at us, it dies. If it's getting in our way, it dies. We just want this problem to stop. Now, about these hyperspace gates. These are hyperspace gates deployed by the Exos just outside of the Kuiper Belt. Humans have only recently found them, have spent several hundred years actually studying them, understanding how they work, and have found ways to actually activate them and allow space travel between their next points. However, the reason why the Exos actually deployed these hyperspace gates in the first place is because they were trying to predict which systems these Lemurians would go to try and consume that system's star. And since the solar system itself does have a relatively small star, this was a prime place to set up a possible ambush for. The ambush didn't necessarily go to plan because of human meddling with the hyperspace gates, but the Exos were still managed to come to this system successfully, and using hyperspace travel are able to actually intercept much of the Lemurian forces. So at the time that it came for humanity to actually flee the system, when the SS Portulus actually goes to make its hyperspace jump through one of the hyperspace gates, something goes awry, whether it be a Lumerian attacking the gate or for whatever other reason. Maybe there was an incompatibility issue with software or hardware or something. I don't know quite yet. We can, go over that later down the line. But something will cause the gate to partially malfunction, so that when the SS Portulus actually makes its jump, it will go through successfully, but the ship will exit the other gate or the other port damaged. And I'm not talking about just only structurally damaged, but everything within it will be sort of possibly damaged as well. Like a lot of the crew will be mutated because of this, because there was an issue as the jump was being made. And other such things as that. The ship itself may have structural damage because it wasn't properly, I don't know, reconstructed correctly. Don't know yet, but we want some sort of issue to happen to where the ship is damaged in some way. There's a bunch of issues that are the result of making this jump. This will also, once the SS Portulus does make it through the hyperspace gate, this will force the ship to basically just, drift aimlessly away from the hyperspace gate. That's pretty much going to be the result of this jump. This is why basically the premise of the game is a survival game, because this is going to take place after that jump, like immediately after that jump has occurred. Now, is everything going to be just complete chaos from the word go? No, there's going to be a sort of progression to everything becoming degraded, for basically the situation deteriorating. Is going to work in stages. And that's something that we're going to actually go through in a few videos from now. So I can't really think of anything else that I outwardly want to explain right now as far as lore, as far as mechanics will go, because all of those things we will be covering later on throughout the series. So for now, I guess this is a great example of taking quick concepts, especially if you've been following along with the annotations that I've been putting out. Some of you may be wondering, why didn't I just explain the concepts that I was actually putting onto the screen itself rather than just saying out loud? It's because I wanted you to get an understanding or see a representation of how you, either thinking out loud or thinking to yourself or collaborating with your team, how just throwing out ideas can actually go straight into translating into how you're going to write those ideas out or recording them in some sort of fashion. That's mostly because if I were, or at least I believe, if I were to actually explain that process, it might be too much of a divide between what I'm showing, what I'm saying, and what I'm explaining being, sort of disconnected. And the only reason why I do that is because sometimes I suffer from an issue where I sort of lose connection between that sort of example myself. So I figured, okay, maybe the best way I should go about showing this is just to actually leave out the explanations and just speak what I want to have written, show what I want written, and then should you, the viewer, would like to see what those explanations actually are as I'm doing them, then I would just have those descriptions made as annotations. That way, if you don't want to see the descriptions and you just want to focus on what I'm saying and what I'm putting on the screen, you could just turn annotations off. But if you do like the video and or found it helpful, please give it a like, even a share, especially a share. Feel free to comment if you have any questions or suggestions or concerns, or email me. Please help keep this series alive and afloat by pledging on the Patreon or to the PayPal or just donating to the PayPal. Be sure to subscribe to catch the latest videos because I do have a lot, and I do mean a lot more topics to cover. We're only barely scratching the beginning of what we'll be doing for this series. So I do hope you guys stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next video.